This meeting is being recorded.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Edna White, your host for Keeping It Real on Purpose. And thank you for being on our virtual show and podcast. Today, we have an interesting author with us today, Journey to My Daughter, Jennifer Rose Asher. She's an author, and she's going to share that with us today. Jennifer, how's everything?
Everything's good. How's everything with you?
Everything's wonderful. So how do you show up in the world?
Well, kind of the underlying message of my book, which I was very surprised at. I had no idea when I started writing this book that this was even a part of it. It wasn't until I was finished and read through the book myself that I said, oh my gosh, I kind of learned along this journey to kind of take a step back and pay attention to what's going on around me, kind of which direction I'm being pulled, that there are signs, I call them signs from the universe. People have different names that are kind of leading us down the right path, and that everything works out kind of how it's supposed to, if only we stay on the right path.
That's right. I like that. Stay on the right path. I like it. So tell us about Journey to My Daughter.
Well, Journey to My Daughter was originally, the first draft of this book was simply I wrote down my story of everything that happened when I was trying to adopt my daughter. And I originally wrote it in 2007 only for my daughter. I wrote it because I wanted her to know what we went through and how we found her and what happened. And it was such an intricate, bizarre story that I needed to write it all down or I was going to forget the details. Right. And I worked in the adoption industry for several years and I had many clients, and often because the whole story with my daughter was a very kind of meant to be kind of story. We never planned to have children, and then we ended up deciding to adopt, and we decided we wanted to adopt from Vietnam, and kind of everything went wrong along the way. Right. But in the end, I felt like that all had to happen for us to find our daughter, because she was very, very much meant to be our daughter. When you look back, it's crystal clear in hindsight that this was meant to be our daughter. And you just have to kind of let things happen as they're supposed to. We have to go through all of this to wait for her to be born. Right. So that's good. Yeah, it's the story of my adoption. When I decided to share it with the world, which was during the pandemic, once my daughter was old enough to kind of consent to allow her story to be told, I wrote this book, and I meant for it really to be for adoptive families and to help them to just see, to give them hope and perspective on that everything will fall into place as it's supposed to. It ended up being a lot more than that. The book ended up being, I've gotten a lot of feedback from readers who had nothing to do with adoption, were in no way related to the adoption world, who said that this book would really help them. It came to them at the right time, just to kind of learn to pay attention and to follow what was coming to them. I play Mahjong, and one of my Mahjong friends says, you got to play what comes to you. And sometimes we'll try and you try and force a hand. You start at the beginning, you say, I want to play odds. And then you get past a whole bunch of wins and you just keep passing them on, and you have to play what comes to you. If you're getting wins and wins and wins, you need to play wins. So, and that's kind of what happens in this book. I had my own agenda. I wanted things to go the way I wanted them to go. And I had to learn, okay, pay attention to what's coming to you.
Right. And that's really good. This is great. So I'm going to jump to a chapter that had my interest, Skeletons in the Closet. And I'm thinking one thing, but the story's not about that. So share that chapter, your thoughts on your what you felt around this chapter. So.
Okay. Well, first of all, I have a funny insight about the chapter names. As I was writing, I was, kind of saving my chapters, and I would save them with a name that just was supposed to be for me to know which chapter it was. So that if I said, oh, okay, I want to, go back to that chapter about my grandmother, I would know, because I wasn't going to remember, that's chapter 13. So I
Right.
just had these in my spreadsheet, and my editor said, I just love your chapter names. And I was like, oh, I didn't mean for those to go into the book. Those are just for me. So sometimes the chapter names are great, and sometimes they're not so good. Sometimes they're just descriptive. But anyway, the Skeletons in the Closet chapter was about our home study. It was about when the social worker came and interviewed us to kind of approve us to adopt. And I felt like, my goodness, they're going to like look through everything, including my underwear drawer. And I was hoping there were no skeletons in the closet for her to find.
That is hilarious. It started out, I was like, oh, I'm thinking when they say skeletons in the closet, oh God, like things started coming out of the woodwork for you. And then I was like, this is cute. This is really cute. It was totally not that. It was really cute though. You were hoping there was nothing in the closet, especially anything dirty, And I was like, oh, she's just cleaning up. That was really cute though. I like that. I like that idea. I really did. And then, I love vampires. So the other chapter was Vampire Baby, and it was not what I thought either.
Well, and it's funny you said that, because when we were talking about chapters, I was like, oh, I have to tell her the Vampire Baby story.
Yeah.
The Vampire Baby story was one of my beta readers. She sent me an email. She had read the first, the manuscript as it was at that time. And she said, I love the book. I love everything about the book. I love the chapter titles. She said, except there's one you absolutely have to change. And I said, what's that? And she said, you cannot title this chapter Vampire Baby. And I said, really? And then I asked all of my other beta readers, I didn't pick that one out. I just said, what is your feedback on the chapter titles? And they every single one of them said, my favorite chapter title was Vampire Baby.
Yeah.
So I had to leave it in.
Yeah. Yeah, but it was a great story. It brought me back to when my son, I was a young mother. I was like 17. So my son was crying, and I kind of looked at him and I was like, oh no, that's his attitude. There's nothing wrong. He's dry. I think this is his attitude. He wants to be picked up. And my mother's, no, he's crying. So it was something simple like that. And so I didn't want to go to the hospital, because what they do at the hospital take forever. So no, let's go to urgent care. She's like, no, we're going to the hospital. It's a big serious thing. So I said, okay, you go to the hospital, call me if they need me or whatever. She's sitting there till 3, and then the doctor comes in and he says, there's nothing wrong with the baby.
Yeah.
So it reminded me the story of that. My mother's like, and so I said, what do you mean? My mom said, what do you mean? He says, I think that was his attitude. I think he was mad about something. He was uncomfortable about something, but he's fine now. And my mother was so mad. Because she stayed up all night, and it was something really simple, you just I said it was like his attitude. He'll calm down, Yeah. So this brought the memory back of that, the story. It really got to me. So go ahead and talk about Vampire Baby.
Okay. So the chapter called Vampire Baby was, we really kind of, we had prepared, because we planned to go, and our plan was to adopt internationally. Well, the international process is very long. You get a referral, and then maybe a month or 2 later you'll go and travel, and sometimes you have to make a second trip. They don't call you and say, come pick up the baby tomorrow at all. It's nothing like that. Well, what ended up happening to us was, we got this call and they said, come pick up this baby tomorrow. And I was like, oh my goodness. And it was a newborn, and we had no plans for a newborn. So we hadn't gotten any of the stuff. We hadn't read it. That, like, literally I read back to when you're expecting, and I skipped that part. I'm like, oh, we're not going to be getting a newborn. We don't need to know that. So here we are with this newborn, and we have no idea what to do. So we're like, all right, we're good. We're educated people. We know what we're doing.
Yeah.
We had diapers, we had wipes, we had everything we need. We had made 8 trips to Walmart to gather everything that we would need. And, I get ready for bed and I feed the baby for the last time, and she's all dressed in her pajamas and she's warm and sleepy and she falls asleep in my arms, and I put her in the pack and play. She's a day old. And about 15 minutes later, she starts to cry. And I'm like, oh no, there must be something wrong. So we do the same thing. And we undress her. We make sure, because somebody said, oh, there could be hair wrapped around something, around one of her toes that's hurting her. We did everything. We looked, and we went through this process through the entire night. The entire night, we would get the baby to sleep. We put her down. 15 minutes later, she'd start crying. We took her up. We were ready to kill each other, my husband and I. and we had no idea what was wrong. And I was like, oh my gosh, our baby, there's something wrong with our baby. Either she's deathly ill, or she's really a vampire and be up all night and sleep all day. But there's clearly something wrong. And in the middle of the night, I said to my husband, what are we going to do? There's something wrong with this baby. And I said, all right, we'll call the pediatrician in the morning. And so we waited till like 7:30 or something. And we just we have to try. We have to see if they're there yet. And I called them. She said, remember, your baby's been in a very confined space. Put her in a bassinet instead of a big crib. And I was like, you don't understand. We're adopting. We're in a hotel room. We don't have a bassinet. All we have is this pack and play. And she said, well, what about a car seat? That would feel cozy to her. And I said, look, lady, this is not going to solve the problem. There's something wrong with our child. She might be a vampire. We're not sure. She might be very sick. What do we need to look for? How do we know what's wrong with her? And she said, look, I'm telling you, put her in the car seat, strap her in, put a blanket over top of her, and try it. And if it doesn't work, in an hour or two, give me a call back. Well, we did it. We put her in the car seat. She slept for many hours, and we were like, oh, thank goodness it's not a vampire baby.
Yeah. And that's funny. That's why it reminded me of, we did, I did everything. My mother was like, oh no, you didn't do this right. So I'm dressing and redressing them, but I didn't. I was doing everything, I even bathed them again. And I was like, Mom, it's just his attitude. It's just his attitude. He's really cranky today, and it's okay. He can do that, as long as he's safe or whatever, and no. I was like, okay. So she didn't listen to me. And took him all the way to the hospital, sat there for nothing. And the doctor told me, no, he's great. I think it was his attitude. And she's like, don't say anything. I was like, I did. Don't say anything. You were right. So anyway, I love that story. I loved it. Car seat was very simple to do, very simple. And I guess you learn that experience as you go along, as you learn what simple things can be done. I know when I was raising my children, I used to think about all the toys I didn't get. So I was always over giving them. And then my kids used to go play with boxes, and wait a minute, you got all toys in there, and you want to get in like a cardboard box that you want to play, it would just infuriate me that kids really love simple things, Oh
so yeah, my best friend sent my daughter this very elaborate rocking horse, and it was huge, and she mailed it from another state, and it was in this huge box, and it had all the popcorn in it. And it was a very fancy thing. And we took it out of the box and we showed it to my daughter. I think she was 2. I think it was for her 2nd birthday. And she climbed into that box with the popcorn and started throwing it around. And I took a picture and sent it to my friend and said, Hillary really appreciates the box of popcorn you sent.
These kids are just phenomenal. The things that they do, I'm telling you, just the things they do. So you write in the back of your book that time and again, my faith was tested and restored. Can you share how you share your faith was restored through this book?
Yeah, well, I mean, the ultimate answer is I got my child. I found my child. Yeah. But along the way, there were multiple times, where I would kind of almost lose faith in humanity, lose faith in humanity or lose faith in the process. And this isn't going to happen. This isn't going to work for us. And I just had to kind of stay the course. And every time, I would just get to kind of that edge of, oh my gosh, everything's going wrong. It seemed like kind of the universe would throw at me a person who was like just sent to me to calm me down. And, one example of that was my friend Mickey, who was, she worked for an adoption agency. And originally I had wanted to go to China. And I was hell bent on, this was, a very good example of how I wasn't willing to listen at the beginning of the book. I was sure my baby was in China. I was going to go to China. I called every adoption agency I could find that had a China program. I talked to all of them, and they all said the same thing, that it was going to take 2 years to go to China. And I was like, no, I'm not waiting 2 years. There's got to be a back door here. There's got to be a shortcut. There's got to be. And then the universe sent me Mickey, and she had a China program, and she said, look, hey, she said, have you ever considered going to Vietnam? And I said, no, Vietnam, like where the war was? And she's like, yeah, they have a very good adoption program, and there's a lot of similarities to the China program, but the big difference is that it's not run by the central government. So there's a lot of variability in the time. And if you choose the right path, you can be done very quickly. And that was my biggest thing. I really wanted to be done. I wanted to find my baby. I wanted her there. And it was the time frame was the most important thing. And I was like, oh my gosh, the universe sent me Mickey to get me onto the right track. Go to Vietnam instead of China. So that was what I meant by that. Like, every along the way, I would just kind of, my faith would be tested, my faith in whatever it was. And then something would kind of bring me back to reality.
Yeah. That's terrific. This book is, audience, this book shares Jennifer's journey. And I read it, and I was giggling about back memories about my kids and what happened with my kids. So it was really good. It's actually good for those who are going through the adoption process. She shares a lot of insights on that as well. So give this book if it's around. And Jennifer, how can they find it?
It's on Amazon, or really anywhere that books are sold. It's on Barnes & Noble and everything too. It's easiest to find on Amazon. It's called Journey to My Daughter. My name is Jennifer Rose Asher, and I'm the author. And I use the same name for everything, for all my socials and everything. Jennifer Rose Asher. If you search under that, I believe I'm the only one. And you feel free to ask me any questions. I've gotten, a lot of people who had questions about my journey or wanted to tell me how it was similar to their journey. I love hearing from readers, and I'm really easy to find.
Okay, great. Well, you heard it straight from Jennifer. Like, love her, subscribe, follow her. She's all around. So make sure you do that. And Jennifer, thank you for being here with us today. And is there anything that you could, no, I got my last question. I forgot my last question. What is it that you like to do?
Oh, okay.
What is it for fun?
Well, I kind of find my peace with my horses. I love to ride horses. I've done all different things with them through the years. I did hunters and jumpers, then I did reining, I did all around quarter horses. Now I just have them for my own peace of mind. And whenever life gets too stressful for me, I say, oh my gosh, I haven't taken the time to go ride. And I just go, and sometimes I literally sit on my horse, close my eyes, and let her walk wherever she wants to. And I just feel the motion of her carrying me. And that for me is the greatest relaxation, and it's my exercise, it's my everything.
Yeah, and those are forms of meditation, they really are. They really are. Anything that gives you a peaceful place that you could go to is a form of meditation. I love that. Okay, so who would you talk to, or what would you say to anyone in the audience that's listening that think they want to adopt, or if they want to become an author? How would you encourage them?
Well, I mean, it all comes down to the same thing. It comes down to kind of paying attention to your own road and signs of what you should be doing. As far as adoption, I feel like the best advice that I ever had was to take a step back, and because sometimes you get so enmeshed in the details of this happening and that happening, and how do I do this, and how do I get this paperwork done? Take a step back, look at the big picture, calm down and then take the next step on the path that's right for you. And that's how I happened to decide to write this book and share this story with the world. I'm currently writing my second book, which is completely different. It's a complete departure. And once again, it was a shock to me. It was a surprise to me. It had a completely different message than what I originally intended. My second book is fiction. One of the things I loved writing this memoir. I loved everything about it. It was 100% from my voice. But I felt sometimes constrained by the facts, because although it's a memoir and it really reads like a novel, I had one friend say to me, I laughed, I cried, I couldn't put the thing down. It really reads like a novel. It doesn't read like a nonfiction book. But at the same time, I felt myself as very kind of constrained by the story. Like I wish there were people that I could give them more of a storyline, so to say, in the book. But I wanted it to be my truthful story. And if that person just wasn't involved in that way, they weren't involved in that way. So I decided to write fiction so that I could give myself that freedom. And my daughter, who I adopted at the end of this book, is now 21. And she is she has been a competitive figure skater for most of her life. She retired last year. And you know, we always talked about that this crazy figure skating world, I should write a book about this crazy figure skating world. And when she retired, she said, Mom, I'm not ready. You can't write about what's happened to me. I said, what if I wrote about just the beginning, like when you were young? And she's like, oh yeah, that'd be fine. So my next project is called Freezing in the Stands. And it's about 4 little girls learning to ice skate, and it follows them through their first year of ice skating, and the 4 moms. And I meant it to be where I wanted to like tell the story of all 4 moms and of all 4 girls, and that they would kind of go off on their own, and then they would come back every Monday afternoon and sit in the stands and share what had gone on in their lives. Well, what it turned out to be, and it is that, but it really turned out to be kind of almost a commentary on mothers in particular, but parents when they have young children in sports, and how parents can sometimes get overly involved. And in the author's note at the beginning of the book, I talked about when I put myself back in that time frame when my daughter was 5 and 6 years old. Everything was so dramatic. Everything was such a problem. Oh, the hours and nights that I spent on the phone crying about which group she was going to be for the ice show and what dress she was going to be able to wear. And as she grew up through the skating ranks, you know, there were big girl problems. You know, she knew of people who had some major issues, and yet it wasn't ever as dramatic and traumatic for us living through it, even though these were big, serious problems, as it was back when she was 5 years old and how upset she was about what dress she was wearing in the ice show. And maybe those moms of those littles should kind of keep things in perspective. So it's a super fun story about these 4 little girls and their moms, and it's wonderful. I love it. It's whimsical. I've written it in a way that children can read it. I didn't include anything that would be inappropriate for them to read. So I'm hoping skaters of any age will be able to pick it up. But the underlying message, again, which I never had any plans for, was again kind of take a step back, take stock of what's going on, and put things into perspective.
Nice. That's beautiful. Very beautiful. It almost sounds to me like a Lifetime movie.
Maybe someday, who knows?
It almost sounds like that. It's there. I think it has an aroma of one of those Lifetime movies or a short. You know how they had the short videos, you know, on Disney. It sounds like one of those stories. It sounds very good. I like it, and I wish you well.
Thank you.
Lots of success on that. And we want to say this is the end of the show. Thank you so much for being here, Jennifer Rose Asher. You are incredible. We give you much love for your next adventure. And thank you.